And now we once again welcome in Jimmy Stein, team expert for BamaOnLine. Jimmy, we talked yesterday. We talked about the offensive line. We talked about the quarterback position. Really wasn't expecting to hop on here and do another video this quickly regarding the quarterbacks, but soon after we recorded, which this is why we should probably wait until after the Monday press conference from Nick Saban. Now, to be fair, I had no idea that he was going to name
Right.
Jalen Milroe the starting quarterback for Alabama moving forward. Uh, just to me, with the way that he had been handling things, the fact that maybe you didn't want to tip off Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, you would have thought maybe he wouldn't reveal that information. He did, which is why we're going to have a new rule where we're not going to record until after that Monday presser, just in case something like that happens again. But we're here to react to it because yesterday we talked a lot about it. We talked about the possibility of, even talked a little bit about the two quarterback system. We talked about Ty Simpson maybe being the better long-term fit. In some ways, I still think that that's the case. But the bottom line is as of right now, Jalen Milroe is the starter. He's earned that opportunity through his play compared to the other the other two quarterbacks. And until something starts to change, that's the way that we should approach this. So, what was your reaction to Nick Saban naming Jalen Milroe the starter?
Yeah, I'm with you, Clint, on the timing of it surprised me. That's not a normal Nick Saban thing to do at all, to announce to Lane Kiffin who your starting quarterback's going to be when that's up in the air. I think Coach Saban likes to keep it as CIA secret as possible in terms of trying to gain even an inch of advantage over the opposition. So it was a surprise in terms of the timing of it. Now, in terms of the substance of it, I don't think it's a big surprise. The thing I'm happy to see, Clint, is, this team has started practicing, day one of spring practice when the 2023 football team officially practiced for the first time. Jalen Milroe was the QB1 that day. What I like to see, Clint, is that, that the games have proven what was already proven on the practice field. Because in my mind, and we're not there to see it, but in my mind, Jalen Milroe won this job in the spring. And then he maintained it in the summer, and then he sort of put an exclamation point on it in the fall. At every what I would call marker of spring practices and fall practices, Milroe was QB1 for all of it, and never fell. But it's not like he fell behind and had to catch back up. He was always one. Now, that doesn't mean that he played great against Middle Tennessee and against Texas. There were problems and flaws and things he needed to improve upon. And it was bad to the point that they made a decision. Let's take a look at the other two guys. And I get that. But I think by naming Milroe the starting quarterback going forward, Nick Saban has basically verified what was thought on the practice field throughout the spring and the summer and fall camp, and that is Jalen Milroe is the best quarterback for now on this football team.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And that's kind of you can rally around one guy. Like one guy has been named as no longer. I know that Jalen Milroe was the quote unquote starter for the first two games, but there was still some stuff that was up in the air. Nick Saban kept talking about, hey, this quarterback battle is not over. Even after we name a starter, guys need to still approach things as if they are the starter. And I'm sure he would like for the backups, multiple to do that moving forward. But as far as other players, receivers, offensive line, running backs, tight ends, defense, coaching staff is very important. It's time to rally around one particular guy, build around him. Now, are there some concerns with that? Yes, I've shared the concerns. Every carry that you're giving to Jalen Milroe is not one going to your running backs. Every time you call a pass and he doesn't throw it to the receiver, he takes off and runs. That's a target that you wanted to go to a receiver that didn't. There's positives to that and there's negatives. You're not going to distribute the touches on offense maybe as much as you would if there was a heavy rushing attack with simply running backs and there was a somewhat volume passing game to play off of that where you're distributing the football to multiple receivers and tight ends and everything else. But I think that when you look at Milroe and look at what he can bring to the offense, and we know that some of it, there are going to be some limitations. But at the same time, I think that now everyone having an idea of what they should expect on a week in, week out basis, I think that's fairly beneficial.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now you can build around. See, you've been a great point. Jalen Milroe started the Middle Tennessee game and started the Texas game, but he wasn't Alabama's starting quarterback. The competition continued, and we obviously saw that in Tampa, the most obvious evidence of that. But the competition was continuing. Now that the competition is declared over, that doesn't mean that another quarterback might not play if Jalen plays poorly for too long of a stretch. But now that it's over, Clint, I think it's on this staff and on Tommy Rees to start building the offense around Milroe. What does he do well? And then do a bunch of that. What does he not do well? And try to do none of that. And I'm not, I'm the team expert here, but I'm not literally an offensive guru OC type. But so my best way to explain this in layman's terms, which is the only terms I got, is we need to build this and it needs to look like Jalen Hurts and not look like Bryce Young because Milroe's a lot more like Hurts than he was Bryce Young. When Tommy Rees is building this plan, I don't want him to watch 2021 and 2022 Alabama. Don't watch that. Watch 2016 Alabama, to some extent 2017 Alabama. Alabama had a lot of success, scored a lot of points. People forget, yeah, the defense was good. It really was. But Alabama scored points and won games every week with what they were doing on offense in 16 and 17. And I hope that Tommy Rees, when he's building this around Milroe, is building it like you would build it around Hurts and not like you build it around Bryce.
Yeah, and that's so key. And that's kind of what we're here to talk about is now that Milroe has been named the starter, what does that mean? Now, earlier I started to say that this comes with some concerns, and I really forgot to elaborate on that. And what I mean is that he's the only quarterback on this roster that is going to run this particular offense. If he gets hurt for whatever reason, you have to kind of scrap things again and start doing other things to play the other guy's strengths. And, I think that with Ty Simpson and Tyler Buckner to some degree and Dylan Lonergan, he's got a little bit of mobility. Eli Holstein certainly does, but they're not the Jalen Milroe caliber runners. And I think to some extent, they all have deficiencies as passers right now, whether it be youth or for one reason or another. But you will have to change some things if a guy goes down. If it was, Ty Simpson and he goes down and you're turning to Dylan Lonergan or somebody, the offense wouldn't have to change necessarily substantially. There would be some things that he does well that you would want to play into, but it wouldn't be as drastic. That is where there is some concern. But assuming that Jalen Milroe stays healthy, you can win football games this way. Now, this is where the question kind of comes in. Can you win championships this way? And, Alabama went to a national championship in 2016 and with Jalen Hurts as a starter, and it lost. It played a great game against Clemson. It came pretty close. Alabama was undefeated. You can get there and you can come pretty darn close to winning. So, I mean, yeah, they lost the game, but you can't really argue that formula was successful in that particular season. 2017, they got to another national championship. There were some struggles along the way, and that's what kind of we're going to talk about. And it did take Tua Tagovailoa coming into the second half, who was more of a pure passer, to get Alabama over the hump and help them win the national championship. But, it was Jalen that got them there. Now, you can say it was other people that technically got them there. I mean, he was the starting quarterback for the entire season up until the second half of that national championship game. But when you look, I mean, there were some stretches, and this is what people need to accept. There are going to be struggles with Jalen Milroe. There's going to be some ugly wins if you can get other things corrected. It could turn from ugly wins to ugly losses if you don't get some of this other stuff corrected. Because one thing Jalen Hurts had when he was the starter was a rushing attack. I mean, you look against Vanderbilt when they blew them out 59-0, close to 500 yards on the ground and 5 touchdowns. Against Ole Miss when they beat them 63-3, 365 and 5. Arkansas when they won 41-9, over 300 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns. Tennessee 45-7 final score, close to 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. In some of those closer games, LSU, Mississippi State, Auburn with the loss, Clemson, even though I understand they won some of these by double digits, it was closer than the blowouts. the rushing attack with your running backs, and Hurts was mixed into that for sure, and so will Jalen Milroe. But you had to be able to get push in the run game and have multiple threats as far as your rushing attack to have success. And in some of those closer games, you didn't get that as much. So that's something to keep in mind, Jimmy.
Yeah, and we talked about it last week. I said it multiple times. Y'all are making too big a deal about who the starting quarterback is because if we can't run the ball, if this team can't run the ball, there's going to be big problems. Doesn't matter if Milroe's the quarterback or Buckner or Simpson. This team has to run the ball because I remember saying, look, this makes football too elementary for our crowd that listens to this because I know everyone's very astute football wise that listens to our show. This makes it too simple, but there's only two ways to move the football: on the ground or in the air. And when you can't move it on the ground, then you have to move it through the air. And that is not a formula for success for Jalen Milroe, for Tyler Buckner, or for Ty Simpson. They're all just too young and inexperienced to win SEC football games with their right arms right now. You've got to be able to run the ball or it's not going to work. And by naming Milroe the starter, look, you've given yourself some advantage. Jahmyr Gibbs had probably his two best games at playing for football for Alabama when Milroe was the quarterback. And that's because the other team has to commit a spy to Milroe. So you're taking a run defender out of run defense as far as the running back is concerned. That guy's following Jalen Milroe around. He's not following the running back. So now there's one less run defender to block. There's one less run defender to worry about. So we should be able to run the ball well when Milroe is a quarterback. And I think, Clint, this weekend, the test for me in terms of is this team going to have success going forward? The test for me is not if Jalen Milroe cuts down on the turnovers. That test is not on my radar right now. I don't care about that. This is what I care about. Did Alabama run the ball well against an SEC defense? And I know Pete Golding's Ole Miss defense isn't what LSU's going to be, and not what Texas A&M is going to be, but it's a start. And that to me is the test this weekend. Alabama needs to find a way to win the game, even by half a point. But secondly, was Alabama able to run the ball with these backs to the point that you can depend on it and win SEC football games? If they can, then I think Jalen Milroe is going to be successful because the team's going to be winning games and he'll be a big part of it.
Yeah, and that's such a crucial piece of all of this. I think the defense is coming on. I think that now, granted, an elite offense going against an elite defense, the elite offense is going to prevail 9 times out of 10 to at least a certain extent. Like the game is designed to help offenses score points, move the football, everything else. It's just where the game is at today. So if you don't see Alabama look like an elite defense against this Ole Miss offense this weekend, don't panic. That doesn't mean that the offense is the defense is terrible or anything like that, but it's going to give up some stuff. So Alabama's got to be able to score some points. But more importantly than I wouldn't say more importantly than scoring the points, but I will say equally as important is you've got to be able to control the game, control the clock. The best way to help your defense is to give them breaks, go on long sustaining drives, keep Ole Miss's offense off the field. The less they touch the football, I mean, they're already touching it less than you would typically get in any normal year because the new clock rules. It's shortening games and things like that. If you're going on long sustained drives, which you should be able to do against their defense, then that should be able to keep their offense off the field, which should only help everybody. And I agree with you as far as the rushing attack and what it means as far as getting a quality push from your offensive line. That 2017 group, I mean, when you look, you had Jonah Williams, you had Rosh Pierschbacher, you had Bradley Bozeman at center, you had Lester Cotton, I think, at right guard, and you had Matt Womack at right tackle. Matt Womack never even, he lost his starting job and finished his career at Alabama, and he didn't do anything else. You had Lester Cotton going undrafted. You had Bradley Bozeman and Rosh Pierschbacher both being day 3 draft picks, I think 5th and 6th round. You only had one first rounder on that offensive line, and that was Jonah Williams. And yet you were able to rush for a lot of yards. And Hurts contributed to a lot of that. But when I was talking about those games earlier where you were averaging 400, even in some cases close to 500 yards, I mean, you look at Milroe's stat lines in those, and he had 48 yards rushing, 41 yards rushing, 14. There was only one of those games where he had 100 plus, and that was against Ole Miss, and he led the team. Otherwise, they got production out of a stable of running backs. There was never a guy really rushing for 150 yards. There was that stretch, where you have a guy have a little bit of success, but for the most part, it was a committee approach. I think that would be beneficial. But the main difference between like 2017, Jalen Hurts especially, and Jalen Milroe right now is turnovers. One thing Hurts had figured out, I think he threw one interception that year. I think he had at
Amazing.
least one fumble, if not a couple. But and I know that he had one against Auburn, but that's at least two turnovers, maybe three, but that's it the entire season.
That's
Jalen
amazing.
Milroe is he's averaging two or three a game almost, against Power Five opponents. So he's got to be able to cut down on the turnovers. That's what makes everything work. Don't put your defense in bad situations. Make good decisions. And I think when you talk about deep ball accuracy, I think Milroe is more advanced and better at that than Hurts was.
Yes.
The short to intermediate game and ball placement and putting the ball in a place where a receiver can create yardage after the catch, I think that's more Jalen Hurts as far as the advantage there. They both kind of had their struggles reading defenses at times. They both were a little quick to take off and run. I think pocket awareness probably favors Jalen Hurts a little bit, quite a bit actually. But you can still win with Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, I think if you went to just any vanilla offensive coordinator and asked him, can you build an offense around a quarterback who not only is exceptional with his legs, but runs a 4.40 at 220 pounds? So he brings that to the table. And he also throws a beautiful and accurate deep ball. Can you build something with that? I've got to believe most offensive coordinators will say, yeah, yeah, give me a pencil and a paper. I can do something with this. Now, even when you throw in now the short and intermediate stuff, he's going to be inaccurate. And sometimes he makes tough decisions that don't pay off. And he can be a little reckless with the ball. What can you do about that? There's still enough to work with here. You give me the guy that can run and throw it deep accurately. There's got to be something you can build with that. And I hope that Tommy Reese and his staff, because it's Gillespie too, it's Wiggins too, it's Joe Cox too, who's a former college quarterback. It's Eric Wolford, who's a offensive warhorse veteran. They're all going to contribute ideas, but you sit around the room, you start with what he can do, and you build that, and you just eliminate things that he can't do or things he doesn't do well. It's a challenge. Of course, it's a challenge because you're not going to have Bryce Young every year. You're not going to have oh, we've got a quarterback that can literally do it all. You can run whatever offense you want. Here's your guy. We don't have that. You're going to have to be creative and you're going to have to be smart and you're going to have to sort of win the chess match with the defensive coordinator every week. But I love some of the physical skill. Look, I love the kid. I think there's a reason. We won't get into all of it, Clint, because frankly, the conversation drives me mad. But I think it's fair to say that the team likes Milroe. The team likes Milroe. I think they want him to be their leader. And I think there's a lot to like about this kid who has natural leadership skills. And from what I heard, I was saying it this summer, not when the game started, but I think Nick Saban likes Jalen Milroe. And Saban's pretty good at picking out the winners, isn't he? Maybe no one's ever been better. And I know we can't call him a winner yet because he didn't beat Texas and Alabama's not in the top 10. But I can't help but think that this kid is a winner and he's going to prove it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think he can certainly help Alabama win football games. There's no doubt in my mind. If everything else around him gets corrected, he's not going to elevate the play of the people around him. In some ways, Bryce masked or covered up a lot of deficiencies. That's not going to be Jalen Milroe. In fact, he's kind of going to help things spiral if other things don't get fixed. But if things are going right around him, I think he can be a good quarterback and he can contribute and be a big part of why Alabama wins football games. He's got to correct the turnover so he can avoid being the reason that they lose football games. So when you're talking about plays and stuff, quarterback draws, QB power, zone reads, quick screens, get the football out of his hand, I think, not only quarterback draw, but like I said, power. Both of those two are going to be key run plays, in my opinion, with a guy like Jalen Milroe. He's a very physical runner. He can, bring that element to the offense. I think if he's going to be out there, you need to utilize that. And then you hammer some of that stuff, and then you take the occasional deep shot, which you set yourself up for if you're running that stuff successfully. There are going to be games against better defenses. I'm sorry to say, to any Ole Miss fans that might be listening, I don't think Ole Miss is a defense that's going to cause a ton of issues. Now, granted, any Alabama can cause itself issues, just like they did against USF. I mean, any defense can cause this offense issues if they're not doing what they need to do. If they do what they need to do, I don't think Alabama's going to have much trouble scoring, a decent amount of points and positioning themselves to win the football game. I can't guarantee that they're not going to do things to shoot themselves in the foot and make things difficult and look dysfunctional. But that's kind of, I think this is a potential get right game. I've been saying that for freaking weeks now. I'm getting sick of saying it, to be honest with you. But if I was Alabama, in order to set yourself up, like I said, I mean, that 2017 season, as you got later on in the year and you had Auburn and you had LSU and Mississippi State was good that year. You had Georgia, you had Clemson. And so the opponent started getting a lot tougher, and Jalen started struggling. He was averaging less than 200 yards of offense in those games. He was averaging, I think, 1.4 touchdowns, with just one of those being passing, completing less than 55% of his passes. And so there were some serious limitations there. And then in the national championship game at halftime, he had like 21 yards passing. I mean, it was an unfortunate performance. He wasn't playing good, and he ended up getting benched. If I was Alabama, I would start treating Dylan Lonergan as the Tua Tagovailoa of this situation. At the end, I know that now that you've named him the starter, Buckner, maybe you do this with Simpson, but I think Lonergan's the more appropriate. You want to give those guys nods and let them get reps at the end of games, but let Dylan Lonergan get out there, sling the football around. Don't just have him turn around and hand the football off. In these games, not this game like this weekend, but in these games where the opportunity presents itself and you've got a huge lead, throw him out there a little early, let him sling the football around, let him work with the first team a little bit. And then hopefully, if you are having those issues, which there's no guarantee that you will, but if you are having those issues towards the end of the season, if you needed to make a similar move where you could get that complementary passing attack against a better opponent, because they're keying in on the run, Milroe, running backs doesn't matter. If you can have somebody that you can turn to at that point, maybe it can be a similar result to 2017. So that's how I would do it. I'm not trying to throw shade or shots at Simpson or Tyler Buckner, but Dylan Lonergan probably would be the guy that I would be trying to get as many reps to as possible in preparation. It's low pressure situations. You let them work through some things and then see what you got at the end of the year. But that's how I would approach it, Jimmy.
Yeah, and one more point. I mean, some of it depends on, is Alabama in the thick of the race or not? I think that's a factor. But whether Alabama's in the race or not, once you get to, let's just say, roughly game 7, game 8, I think there has to be a meeting. I don't know who all has to be in the room beyond just Nick, but there has to be some talk once you get to game 7 or game 8 that, all right, let's place ourselves in this room next spring, next February, okay, or next March 1st, 2 weeks or so before spring practice starts. Who do we envision as the primary contenders for the starting spot? And if the first name that leaps to mind is Dylan Lonergan, then we need to start getting Dylan Lonergan on the field. He needs to play now. You can play in 4 games and the bowl game and still be a redshirt. Let's take advantage of that rule, and let's not go into next spring with maybe the guy that you think's going to be the guy have 0 experience. That makes no sense to me at all. Now, it could be that I'm getting ahead of myself on Lonergan, and maybe the answer to that one is, well, by next spring, Milroe and Simpson are going to be really good and experienced and a year older, and Lonergan's not a name that comes up. But I don't think that's the case. I think Lonergan's the first name that comes up based on what little I know. But no, I think that's a great point, Clint. I think getting Lonergan ready, whether that means out of the bullpen in 2023 or a potential game 1 starter in 2024, to me, that means getting Lonergan on the field. And as to when that's going to happen, I don't know. But no later than game 8 or game 9. When again you don't even have to worry about blowing a red shirt.
Yeah, and I mean with Tua, I mean you were looking at a situation where you knew that he was going to be pushing for playing time in year 2. I mean, obviously you had the competition. You didn't know that he was going to beat a bench Jalen permanently, but you knew this guy had some talent. He had some skill, and if you needed that element out of your offense later on in the year, it was nice to know that you had it, or not necessarily know that you had it, but you had a guy you can turn to who could potentially bring that. And, Dylan Lonergan, much like Tua Tagovailoa, I think mentally he's got the right stuff. His issues right now, it's not a confidence issue. It's not it is simply not being experienced, not, and you don't want to rush him out there. It's him not necessarily knowing the playbook like the back of his hand yet. It's him, situationally knowing exactly what he needs to do, taking as far as taking full command of the offense and playing confidently and just having the right stuff mentally. I think he's got these elements. It's just bringing the other stuff on. And if you can get him, if I see him, there's no point in jogging him out there if you're going to have him turn around and hand the football off 12 times in the game. Just
Right.
leave him on the bench.
Right.
Save the red shirt. But if you're actually going to get him out there and get him meaningful reps, I'm totally fine, and I think fans should be fine with him not being redshirted. I mean, you sacrificed that with
Yeah.
Tua and had no problem doing that because you're like, I mean, this cat, he's got a very bright future. He could be a star. He might not even be around, whether he's a redshirt sophomore or a true junior, may not matter. He might be here a couple of years and that's it after this year. That's like in Ty Simpson, I thought he showed enough where he might be that guy. They still believe in him to get him out there and let him operate the offense and sling some passes around. But just as limited as as it feels like they are with him in the game and some of his issues, I'd get Lonergan out there in some of those low pressure situations and just see what you got, and it might pay off down the road. Or Jalen Milroe might never put Alabama in a position where you're like, well, we're not getting anything going on offense like Jalen Hurts did against Georgia. It was like, I mean, 21 passing yards and a half. It was like, I mean, you don't have a choice here. I mean, you got to get something going, down by multiple scores. And so just because Hurts did it doesn't mean Milroe will. I mean, he might finish the entire season just like Jalen Hurts did in 2016. Finished that entire season, was running in a touchdown from like 30 yards out against Clemson with 2:07 left on the clock to give Alabama the lead. So he start to finish. I mean, I wouldn't say start. Blake Barnett started, but pretty much from start to finish, he was the starter, and he would never really had his job threatened. So maybe Milroe will do the same. I know that most Alabama fans, I would hope all Alabama fans are pulling for him to have success because he's the guy right now, and I don't foresee that changing anytime soon unless something catastrophic happens and happens multiple times. So we'll see. Jimmy went a little longer as always, not surprised at all, but appreciate you taking some time to hop on here with me after doing a video yesterday, and we will talk again soon, brother.